I'm tired of playing my favorite tabletop RPGs as one of the old boring races. I don't want those generic, store-brand backstories. I want to roll a character with a bit more character. Well, Roll for Combat is here to help with their incredible new book, Battlezoo Ancestry's Classic Creatures, which gives you the power to create the character of your dreams. Dig into 12 unique playable monster races in this beautifully printed, massive, hard-cover book filled with in-depth descriptions, abilities, lore, and more. Send that dusty old dwarf right back to the mines and live out your isekai fantasy by becoming an actual intelligent weapon that you wield yourself. Or you could let a friend grab you instead. Teamwork. Put that elf back on the shelf and become a sentient dungeon, complete with traps, treasures, and a living avatar. You could even put an end to the age of man and become a shape-shifting mimic. You know, those things that gave you trust issues ever since you were eaten by one in Dark Souls? Ooh, that could be you. Click the link below or head on over to Battlezoo.com to secure your copy of Battlezoo Ancestry's Classic Creatures today and become the life of your adventuring party.
Now we're live, Derik.
Hello.
We're live.
It is Thursday, so this is very strange for me. I'm like, oh, I don't have racquetball. Oh, wait, but I have a stream like immediately after this stream. So
Yeah, it'll be great. When's your stream?
7 p.m.
Okay, yeah. So we'll need to make sure you get some dinner first.
That's about basically all I need, yeah.
Well, yes.
Okay.
We had to move it because Mark was out on Wednesday and I was out on Wednesday as well. So
Yeah, I was out to try to make up for the weekend because I was sprinting through some last stuff for Eldamon, which I think when one piece of art comes in is going to be ready. Is that right, Steven?
yeah, so come out next week.
That's awesome.
Well, it worked out well for me because yesterday, and today, I have been jamming at work and trying to finish an end of week sudden deliverable. So I wouldn't have been able to come on yesterday either. So it all works out.
So anyhow, we are going to get into it. We're not going to even talk about other topics today because I brought Derik, not because he's such a wonderful human being, but Derik actually...
You're awful, Steven. That's mean.
Well, I said not just because.
Look, Steven calls him like you say them.
That's one of the reasons. I didn't say it's not the only reason. I was getting to it, is that he knows Avatar: The Last Airbender. We ran it. He ran it for me at wasn't Gen Con, at Origins, where I got to play the Budgetar, which was fun.
Yes.
And
look, somebody had to step up when Aang was in the iceberg.
Not that you could win, but if someone could win a role-playing game, I would have won. And
that is accurate.
and
Steven, you're apparently muted according to one person.
What?
Maybe it's only them. I don't know. Because I can hear you.
Oh, I can definitely hear you.
I hear you great.
But no, this is this is I would assume they can. I mean, they can.
So if people hear him except for Fire Touch. All right, that's fine.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll hear you except him.
Look, you messed me up. I'm gonna ban you, Fire Touch.
But no, yeah, I'm excited. I mean, obviously, I love. For me, magic has always sort of occupied a very strange world, and I am not the biggest. I used to be, and it depends on the situation, but I'm not the biggest Vancian caster fan. I much prefer the style of magic, if you want to call it that. It's not really magic, but like that like bending does, that Avatar does, the kineticist does, and the elemental Avatar does, because to me that feels more, especially in the context of a TTRPG, a modern TTRPG, it feels more appropriate for me. So yeah, so I'm a big fan of the Avatar show, the Avatar TTRPG Legends. I like the kineticist class. I think it's pretty great. We did like a 8-hour stream about the kineticist.
Jesus.
I agree with Derik on all of those. Kineticist class is great. The show is great. And the great. RPG is great as far as I know, which is not as far as Derik because he's run it multiple times.
Right. Sorry, and I just want to say one thing though, because like I actually need to do like a whole video or a whole stream probably where I like had this like apologetics tour for Avatar Legends, because I think a lot of people mistake it. And the thing is and I'll say this: Avatar Legends is fundamentally not a game about bending. It's not. And in a way, neither is Avatar the show. In that way, it's about these characters. It's about young people being put into this difficult, and there's nothing wrong with wanting cool elemental kick-ass martial arts powers. But Avatar Legends, the TTRPG from Magpie Games, it's not the game to do that. The game that you should do that in is a game that is, has cares about combat, has well-balanced, rich array of powers in a rich way. And that's where you get into like the Pathfinder 2nd edition. And that's where you start looking at the elemental avatar. So I think there's a lot of people who kind of went into the Avatar experience expecting to get what, hopefully we get in this. And so I think that while I think they serve different purposes and masters in that regard, I think if you're more into the kind of some of the action-packed, high-flying adventure heroics of the show and the really cool powers and all the really fun bending, I think Avatar Legends, the RPG, can leave you kind of hanging, whereas something like this can definitely fill in that void and deliver.
Yeah, the reason I wanted to do this stream, a few reasons. One, I only played the Avatar game once, but I did feel that being a Earthbender, it felt very 99% of the time we were talking. It was very little rolling, and it felt like a true role-playing game, which is fine, but this is not the meat and potatoes, let's bend things and do damage and all that. Correct. And the other reason is that the Amazon show came out, and I watched the first 3 episodes this morning.
You mean the Netflix show?
The Netflix show, sorry, not Amazon. The Netflix show came out, and sorry, my mini review is the acting is yikes. It's not great. Not great acting. Oh, sorry, my throat hurting.
Yeah, I number one, I'm really excited about the show. In fact, I might resubscribe to Netflix. I canceled years ago, just to watch that show because I'm such a fan. That being said, what brief snippets I've seen on the trailers did make me a little bit wary about the kids acting.
The acting overall isn't that great, but the special effects and the world building and the bending makes up for it. And there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of fighting. Like every episode has multiple fights.
Right.
And it looks fantastic. The earth bending, everything looks great.
Right.
And then it made me excited because I was like, wow, just watching this, it actually, in the beginning gave me a little goosebumps because there's a big fight with earthbending, and I've never seen earthbending done that well. Like, it's just like, picking up the rocks and throwing them in. I'm like, okay, this is fantastic. Like this, it really looks like what I imagine in my head. And I've never seen this done before. And it's not a cartoon, it's like it looks really good. It's not crappy special effects, which, you see a lot of nowadays, but it was like, wow, they really spent the time and money and budget and effort, and it looks really, really good. And then Battlezoo Eldamon's coming out in about a week. It's definitely going to come out next week, I promise. And we've talked endlessly about the Eldamon trainers, but there's another whole class in there, baby. There's the elemental avatar, which basically allows you to control one of 13 elemental powers and kind of do bending. And it is combat, and more combat. So if you really like combat...
I wanted to take a look at this because the title of the video is Building an Airbender in D&D and Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
We'll talk about airbending, but there are other aspects, obviously.
Right.
Sorry, Mark.
What you got, Derik?
I was going to say, so the first thing I want to ask, and you may have covered this in previous things, but we're all here today. So the first thing is obviously, we've got Eldamon scattered around to the high winds. Mm-hmm. And fundamentally, I know that with Eldamon, you all were going for, a sort of getting some of that Pokemon, that Pocket Monsters, Digimon experience into the D&D game. A lot of people love those games, and to have that experience, and thus the Eldamon trainer, I believe, is sort of, I guess you would say, the marquee class of the book. And certainly there's a lot of stuff about Eldamon and all this sort of stuff. So why is the elemental avatar here?
Well, I feel like the elemental avatar is the dark horse very, very useful class that's in the book. The Eldamon trainer is a marquee because it collects and trains Eldamon, but also any class, no matter how much we work with the playtesters to make sure it's easy for you to like get the Eldamon in there, and even if your GM doesn't want to deal with it, you can just deal with it. You don't have to turn the entire campaign into being just about Eldamon. All of that. Ultimately, it is a pet class that is potentially trying to collect and befriend 162 Eldamon. There's going to be some complexity there to be able to do that. The elemental avatar, on the other hand, allows you to, instead of have 162 Eldamon, an Eldamon is melded inside of you, because Eldamon naturally, kind of like Spren in the Stormlight Archive, like meld into things and are sort of phased out. So they might meld into you, they might meld into an item and make it a magic item or a monster. If they meld into you and go to sleep there for a while, you might eventually become an elemental avatar. And that means you are using the powers. So you are like a bender. I mean, there's 13 elements. So there's a lot of things that would either be part of another element for benders or would not be an element for them that you can use, each with different play styles. And the elemental avatar lets you focus on that one elemental play style and be the best at that. It's also much easier for a new player to use. And I have data. I love data. I have data from 2 days ago. I ran a demo for the distributors who distribute these books to like the people at Barnes and Noble and some of these other bookstores. And they had barely ever played any tabletop RPGs at all, let alone Pathfinder 2nd Edition, which I was running for them. They'd maybe done some demos with Paizo at previous events, right? And so I gave them these elemental avatar characters. One of them had a trainer, and the players of the elemental avatars were able to just pick it up and play it immediately. And it was, in fact, they had less trouble than the person who had a fighter, because there was someone playing a Leshy fighter who, because the fighter needed to like mix and match like sudden charge, strides, and strikes, whereas the people playing the avatars picked out elemental powers and threw them out, and they did great without even understanding the game. So part of it is it's a better one for young players, for newer players. It's a different fantasy. You might not want 162 Eldamon. Some people might be like, Mark Seifter created a new magic system, essentially, that's non-Vancian with 13 elements. My GM, or I, the person saying this, hate these little creatures and cute things, or we just don't want it. Why can't I use this magic system some other way? And the elemental avatar also does that. So there's about a dozen reasons why. And also just like ultimately, if you're going to create a new magic system with 13 elements, and there's 20 total, we might do 7 more later. That takes hundreds of hours to playtest the magic system, to create it. Making a new class is hard, but it's not as hard as that. You might as well have multiple classes that can use it and not just one. So
right.
There's a lot of reasons that you want to have an elemental avatar.
No, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think you sort of started to touch into that. I think in terms of like the different role that it could play from like an experienced versus a veteran player. But in the context of, the party dynamic, we all kind of have an implicit understanding of where the cleric lies. And I understand that things have changed. The cleric isn't always just the heal bot like they used to be, right? You might have a war priest of, some battle god and you do a bunch of damage. I understand that things have changed, but by and large, I think we still have some of those tropes that we can kind of fall back on. And I think that I know that, one of the big things that came up when we talked about the Rage of Elements kineticist, and I think would be in this case with the Eldamon and the Elemental Avatar, is those character classes can be a little bit trickier to pigeonhole, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's sometimes it's sometimes interesting to think about like what role or what difference do you see the Elemental Avatar holding, not just in the context of the wider Pathfinder 2 Pathfinder game, but compared to the Eldamon.
Okay, that's a good question, but I feel we've drilled too deep into the weeds before I could say the thing that I wanted to say at the beginning, which is this episode is called Building an Airbender in D&D in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Now, Derik has assumed, and maybe many of you viewers already know this, a lot of facts, which he is correct on, about things that are in Pathfinder 2nd Edition already, but some people who are watching this might not know all of these. So I want to go through what exists before Eldamon for playing Airbender in these games.
Well,
in D&D...
Before we get into that, how about a few quick words, and then we'll get into it, because I'm probably not going to talk for another hour. So, see this little mimic? Look at this guy. Look at him, Derik. I'm going to bite you. He's going to bite you. Why are you angry? You love this. You don't want one? So I shouldn't bring one when I see you at Origins. Oh, come on. Really? That do you think that is superior to a mimic that can eat you?
To be fair, this is my backup bag. My primary bag is a Crown Royal bag. As it should be.
But the point is, this isn't something you bring with you. This is something you display on your shelf.
You know what I display on my shelves? Books.
I can tell based on looking at your
So
shelves.
do I. But everyone, oh, come on. You don't have
You got a big sword hanging over the top of yours.
I didn't say it was the only thing I display. I display books too. Well, if you want this for free, you have less than 2 weeks left. And
maybe less time than that,
yeah,
because
probably.
I've been looking at it and there's only a little over 100 more because once 1,000 backers happen, that's it for
They're
the free
gone.
ones.
So just go to yearmonsters.com and you can get the hardcover, special edition, every edition. There's tons of editions. And you can play a mimic, you can play a devil, doppelganger, gremlin, lots of things. They all, and every single one of these will annoy Derik to no end. So
There you go.
That's the main reason. So check that out. The other thing is, if you have any questions, feel free to super chat and we'll answer those. I will be showing some previews throughout of the book itself. If you want to call out specific things, Mark, just let me know, or Derik.
Sure.
Because I have the book out. And then we are going to go into the history of this class of bending and how you can play it in both Pathfinder and 5e. And the answer is not very well until now.
That is not the answer.
That is the answer.
That is not the answer.
For 5e, it's the answer.
It is not the answer for Pathfinder. It is the answer for D&D. And we will for the core books by WotC, and I will get into Derik's question as I answer that question. So to start out, how do you play an Airbender in D&D and Pathfinder? In D&D, you do not have a lot of great options. There aren't any classes that really are going to get you tons of magic all the time. The Warlock can get your magic back fastest and maybe a decent bet, but its list is not going to give you exactly the spells you want. And even if you pick the best list for elemental spells, D&D, if you look through the WotC books, just don't have a lot of air spells. Now, if you did fire, you might be able to cast some fire spells. There's a decent number of them, but it still doesn't feel as much like a firebender. And you could say lightning, but that's in Avatar. Lightning is an advanced firebending technique and not an airbending technique. So you really need air-based spells to go airbending.
Now, my 5e knowledge isn't as up to, but isn't there like a elemental monk or something?
Yeah, and that is probably going to be one of your better bets, but it's not really that much of a spellcaster. It's more of an elementally themed monk. Which, to be fair, there are martial arts styles in Avatar and in The Last Airbender, and you definitely can get some of that sort of flavor, but you're not going to be like going around bending all sorts of elements with that. So it's a little tricky in 5e. Pathfinder has a better option for you, which is the Kineticist class. Mm-hmm. Unlike 5e, the Kineticist class is a great class that it's not exactly a bender. Neither is the elemental avatar, but in terms of airbending is tricky because it is one of the most conflict averse of the four, or it is the most conflict averse of the four elements in Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's moving around, dodging, and kind of like tricking people, and uses very few direct attacks. And the Pathfinder Aero Kineticist, to be fair, if you go pure air on a Kineticist, they are pretty weak at attacking. They have a lot of utility options. So that much is good. The Kineticist class for Pathfinder, though, it does heavily encourage you, at least as you level up, to take more elements later on. You might have some very good options that you can take for specializing in your element early on that makes you want to stick with it for a while, but eventually you're looking down the list of what's left, and what you see is the ones you did not take earlier on. And so you eventually are just like, oh, it's obviously better to take more elements at this point.
Yeah, and I obviously haven't played I've never played a kineticist, certainly not till like 20th level or something like that. But my sense is that I'm going to be this element only for 20 levels is kind of a, I'm not saying it's like a flawed approach. You could totally do it, but I feel like, I'm not saying that you're going to pick up all 5 gates and be, and have or 6 gates or whatever, and have all the different elements. But I do think there's kind of an implicit understanding there that like you might heavily specialize in air and then you pick up some fire, or you pick up a little bit of earth or something like that. So yeah, I agree with you on that.
I would say it's at least heavily discouraged.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of discouraged, and it's because I don't want each element to be able to do everything. But I will say that again, take it for what it's worth. But when we did like a 6 or 7 hour stream about the Rage of Elements Kineticist, and metal for us was a little disappointing, but air was really fun. And I thought it did a good job of capturing sort of some of the fun dynamics of the air, a lot of movement, a lot of ability to like move, even the impulse, right, which allowed you to like move again after you attacked.
Yeah.
So mobility was like very present. Obviously the ability to sort of fly or partially fly, or
the utility was over 9,000 on the air kineticist, and it is. Some of the ability to fly and like move things around, it's just like, what is this doing? This is really strong. And it does have that. Its offense, if you don't go to any other element, is relatively low. And we had some play testers for Elemental Avatar that had an aerokineticist, and I had to do a double take because I was like, did you build that wrong? Is it really only doing this much damage at this level? And it was, but its utility was so powerful that it was providing things that nobody else could have done for the party as well. So the Kineticist class, for those who are not familiar with it, is an excellent class. It's in the Rage of Element book. It's essentially a magical take on the sort of martial style of character that can just do whatever things they want to do. What they have, they can just do them over and over. Like a fighter can always sudden charge, and they might sudden charge when the situation calls for it. Kineticists have like a sort of martially blast that they can do for one action, and a bunch of other elemental powers they can also use whenever they want. They've got an exceptionally complex and rewarding action economy that allows you to piece together an optimal turn, assuming that the enemies don't mess around with you, that you can generally repeat over and over again for great effect once you sort of get the system mastery to solve that equation. Yeah. So the Elemental Avatar is coming at this from a very different way. Now, we had a lot of people who played both Kineticists and Elemental Avatars, and their general opinion was that while both classes do not have daily resources per day, and they both are using elemental magical powers that are not spells, that they otherwise than that, like, couldn't be more different in how they go about what they're doing. One of the people who played them was saying that they also made the analogy of like very magical martial for the Kineticist, and they thought the Elemental Avatar was more like a blaster caster that doesn't use slots in most elements. There's some like the life element that is a support element. So that's getting back to Derik's question of what slot they can fill in your party. Now, the reason for this and the way that this might make your playstyle be different for your Airbender if you're playing them is that the Elemental Avatar has a number of powers that they have prepared at once. And they can use those powers any number of times. But once they've used a particular power, they cannot use that power again until they refresh their elements by doing some kind of special action that's usually not as offense related that gets you your elements back in alignment. You could think of these in Avatar: The Last Airbender if you want to think of it that way. It's like those times like Aang has been attacking for a while, and then he like rides a ball of wind around or glides around for a while and enemies attack him for a bit. He repositions, he gets into a better spot, then he starts going on the offense again. It's kind of like that.
So in that way, is it kind of like, was there any, like, because that sort of play pattern, I mean, obviously it's not as binary as the Magus, but right, like the Magus has this idea of like, you have this reload action that you kind of have to take that potentially isn't like, it's an action and it might help you, but it's not necessarily the most like powerful or dramatic thing. It's more of sort of like a, you know, you did your really big cool thing. We can't have you doing big cool things every round forever for free, so we gotta have you pay like a cost to kind of reload.
Sort of.
Okay.
It definitely is it's at least in the same family, even if it's a cousin and not a sibling, because
or like the Warblade from Book of Night.
Yeah, it's somewhere in the family of Warblade or Magus. The difference there being that the Sword Sage, I guess, which would be the more equivalent from there,
correct,
had to take the turn off to get their stuff back, whereas an elemental avatar is using different powers to get their stuff back. That is a refresh power. But it's in there. You could think of it like Gloomhaven, where you play your cards and then you do the thing to get the cards back. Like, there's a lot of situations that are like this. But the benefit of this, what I'll call rotational playstyle, is that the powers can be actually a lot stronger in general. And there are some exceptions because, as I'm sure your 8-hour video, which I did not watch, determined
actually,
some of the kineticist powers can do very, very, like, especially like there's a combo at like 20th level for fire kineticist or 18th to 20th that can just put out more damage than almost anything else. And if you're ignoring those, right, the elemental avatar's powers typically perform higher than what a kineticist is doing, but you can't do it again until you refresh. And so you have to think of creative ways to combine a bunch of different abilities rather than just like, okay, I'm going to make another sun and then I explode with fire and make another sun explode with fire. You have a good combo with the kineticist that you can do over and over again. And so that makes them actually turn out in practice completely the opposite in the way that you use them. Rather than having one thing that you want to do, and then if the enemies cause the situation to change, you have backups with the kineticist. In the elemental avatar, you have to constantly think about ways you can use each of your powers, and if you can't, that's okay. You can refresh early. You can get back the one that is best but it's for this situation.
But like Gloomhaven, right? You want to refresh when you're out of cards in your hand.
You do.
Because
that is best practices.
Yeah.
I've found situations where it was better to refresh now because the enemies were very far away and I wanted them to approach me or something like that. But
but that's part of the fun tactical puzzle making and puzzle decisions.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting too that you say that, because I'm recalling back to when Rage of Elements dropped, and obviously a lot of people were excited. I still think it's a great class, but you know, my PF2 grognards in my Patreon, a lot of people were kind of, you know, kibitzing a little bit about, you know, this thing doesn't really do enough damage. And it felt like, oh, I want this big elemental destructor. And it was like, well, it can't, you know, I mean, yeah, like you said, there might be a couple of degenerate, you know, thermal nimbus type, explode the sun or whatever type combos. But by and large, it's like when you can just have this, when you have a powerful thing that you can do over and over and over again, it's like, it can't be that powerful, because if it is, it's like, well, the people who are using spell slots or whatever are going to feel really, really silly.
They're like, what am I doing?
Right. What am I doing here? And so, and, you know, and again, I think that they struck a really good balance, and I thought
they did a great job.
And we played through the last half of Abomination Vaults with, after the Dwarf Barbarian died, the Dwarf Barbarian made a Dwarf Earth/Wood kineticist, which was very useful against all the undead there. And it was great, you know, like a really, really versatile class, had a lot of fun and abilities, but you know, not like this kind of crazy super blaster like you might think. And so I think that's an interesting challenge.
The elemental avatar kind of is the crazy super blaster, and it is very challenging because it is a class that has a niche that it is going to do better than other classes at being able to go all day while blasting throughout the day. In exchange, there are some significant drawbacks that our playtesters have seen. I've seen when I'm playtesting them. For instance, the example I gave before, if you have only one of the powers that you've prepped that turns out to be the best one for this situation, then not only might you have to refresh sooner or use a power that's like, okay, this is a wide AoE, but there's only one enemy right now, but you also, like, a lot of eggs are in the basket of that power. So, for example, my fire elemental avatar that I was playtesting, in one fight, I crit with my most damaging attack and rolled very high on damage. And people were like, what? How much damage was this? It was a lot. It was about as much as critting on a power attack might be with like a fighter or barbarian. I still under-damaged the barbarian in that fight, but that one crit, people were like, this class is wild. How could you do that? But then in the next fight, we fought against a Kelpie, and I missed all of my attacks. And my AoEs weren't as great because it was a solo Kelpie. And so I barely helped that much during that fight due to my bad luck. So it has weaknesses, it has strengths. The strengths are pretty strong. The weaknesses are pretty apparent too. And our playtesters have found that it tends to balance out. You feel really good a lot of the time, but you don't feel like you're overshadowing the other classes. And I hope to hit a point like the Kineticist does, where you're in that situation.
And I know you all at home won't understand this, but I will say that, I'm a nerd and I'm an analyst, and nothing has ever made me happier than this page 71.
What?
Page 71 is your favorite thing?
Yes, page 71 is my favorite thing.
I know what page that is. I could show that page.
Is it the type chart, or is it the star charts?
The
radars.
Yeah, it's the radars.
Ready, everyone? This is here we go. Ta-da!
Yeah, I think you've put that in an ad before.
Look at that. There we have everything outlined, so you can see all the different
each of
powers.
The 13 elements has a very specific play style, and you can see from the radar charts a little bit about that. It's not all captured in the radar charts. Air is about moving around. You're constantly in motion. You're hard to pin down. Darkness is all about controlling the light levels by messing around, making things darker. Its complexity is high because, let's be honest, light and darkness is already hard to deal with, and this makes it a little harder for everyone. But it's very cool. You can. How
many people out there have actually used the seek action, like in a meaningful way? Mark, I know you have, but
I did, but not a lot of people, right? So darkness is all about that. Death is it's got a little diamond shape.
Yeah, very, very focused on. It's like nope.
It's gonna kill you with damage or debuffs. That is what it's gonna do when it's death.
Earth looks good.
Earth has the highest aggregate score in this particular representation. The reason why is Earth has very low range and sometimes is limited to attack things on the ground, and range was not one of the four categories that we put in there. So I even listed that in the text. I'm like, Earth is gonna come up looking great on this because one of its weaknesses is not on the chart. But Earth does pretty great offense. It doesn't really sacrifice it that much for its high defense, but in exchange, it can't go out as far. A lot of its attacks are based on its reach, which also might encourage you to do something about that.
And I think it should be worth noting that, at least in terms of the elemental avatar, one of the nice little benefits of being a kineticist in Pathfinder 2nd edition is that your primary key stat is con. So even though you're not like a 10 hit point or 12 hit point class, you're going to probably have an 18 in your con. So you're going to have a pretty good hit point total. This is a wisdom based class because it's more monkey.
You have to get in tune with the Eldamon that's within you by meditating. There's a lot of pictures of that.
And as an 8 hit point class, you're not going to have that same bank of hit points that you might otherwise have. So going into melee range or having that short range, like you said, you're more of a kind of probably like I would imagine a short to medium range blaster, in that respect.
But you've got a bunch of things to raise your defense. You can get armor class up. You can get resistance. There's even an ability that is like an Aegis for when you're in a real bad spot that gives you an absolutely absurd amount of resistance until the next turn. But it is a 2-action ability, so you're not doing much else on that turn other than being impossible to kill. So you have to find the right time for that. Right. Then there's electricity. So electricity's big thing is that you store up charge with a kind of weaker turn, and then you really annihilate things with damage that is on par with some kind of min-max Magus build that we all know that involves psychic or something else like that. And so
imaginary blades. Imaginary weapon. Sorry.
Yeah. So electricity is also an interesting one because if you have a power that is not the best for the situation, you might use that first to charge up and then use the best one once you're already charged. Fire also knows what it does. It's heavily focused on offense because it's going to do damage and then persistent damage over time, which is more considered in the offense category for this because it's just more and more damage until everything is burned down. Then there's force. It's high on control. That's because force is technically moving things around in whatever direction you want. It's not pushing them. It's not pulling them. It's just you choose where they go. Your allies, your enemies.
Or you would call this a slide.
Yeah, it is. This is the slide one. Yeah. Your allies, your enemies, you can sometimes like puppet master something to like force them to move where you want them to go on their turn. There's a lot of options with force. So then there's ice. Ice's deal is that it slows your movement speed in a way that's cumulative. As you keep getting more frozen, you have to spend actions eventually to like remove the ice. So it is a sort of soft crowd control that turns into a harder crowd control when your movement is so lousy that you have to actually spend actions to get rid of it. Life is the only one that is not an attacker. Its offense is down there near the bottom. It's only there because it has a couple of things it can attack with and can attack undead very well. And life is all about being an at-will. It's at-will damage mitigation. So it does not have a once every 10 minutes clause like the healing effects from Kineticist, but it is not an infinite healing Pez dispenser either. It uses different ways with temporary hit points, or reducing damage right as they come in, or healing damage right after you take it, but not a while after you've taken it, in order to be able to mitigate incoming damage, but not just auto heal everyone up to full always. But that way you can keep using your abilities instead of being locked out for 10 minutes afterwards. Then there's light. Light is going to like outline things in light, which often provides you a buff toward your team, a buff towards attacking them, lets you find them if they're invisible, and it can dazzle them so that the enemies can't see very well. Then there's mind. Mind is one of the only ones that is continually attacking like will or wisdom save or other mental saves a lot. And it has mental conditions like the stupefied or frightened condition that it puts on to things. So it's got a lot of debuffs. Water is an interesting one. It's very different from Avatar: The Last Airbender in the sense that it is not the healer, life is. Water is about the idea that water can be powerful. It can carve out rivers through rock. And so it has these tides that go in and out. And when you're in high tide, you do big damage, major effects, but something bad happens to you. It's like a drawback, like you knock yourself prone or you get flat-footed or something like that, or off guard in Remaster. And when you're in low tide, the tides come in and it's weaker, but it actually usually buffs you or increases your defense. And when high tide, you also push the enemies away, and in low tide, you draw them towards you when your defenses are stronger. And then lastly is wood. Wood sows plants onto the battlefield that sometimes are just generic, difficult terrain, but some of them are special and do something else, like cacti that deal damage when you walk through them. And then it harvests those plants when you use another effect in an area you already sowed them to gain extra benefits.
This is a lot. Like
that's the ones we have.
I mean, that is a lot.
Yeah, you have no idea.
I mean, take this, as someone for me, I mean, like, this is a lot. I mean, I'm not even saying
this
like
took a long time to do.
Yeah. like I'm saying this as someone who's like, this seems very like, and again, you do say that, like, for example, the wood thing, which you were talking about, planting resources on the battlefield, consuming them to power other, it is noted as that is a complexity high power. But the play style of these just all sounds so different and intriguing, and quite frankly, potentially very complex. I mean, one of the things again that I think, can suffer sometimes in Pathfinder Second Edition is, in my personal opinion, that like there's kind of these optimal strategies and you kind of just keep using them over and over again. But when you're talking about inbuilt mechanics that fundamentally change the status and the nature of your abilities, of your capabilities, from round to round, depending on what's available and what the situation is. Like that makes for, I think, a much more dynamic gameplay experience. The water one in particular sounded really, really cool to me. It reminded me of an old Magic card. It was a blue enchantment from like Ice Age that was like you put a counter on it, and then all your creatures got +2/+0, and then you put a second counter on it, and they were all +0/+0. Then you put a third counter on it, and they were -2/-0, and then a fourth counter 0/0, and then it would reset. And it would just go through these cycles. And so it's like, as a player, I mean, that's a bad card, to be clear. Magic the Gathering.
It was not a good card. I remember that card. It was not a good
card. But
this one is good.
But in the context of the game, it meant that you're like, hey, I know that in a couple of turns, I'm going to have an opportunity to be really offensive, and I should change my play style so that I can take advantage of that kind of power boost I'm having. But I also know that I'm going to have to be defensive in a turn because all my creatures are going to be shrunk on their power. So like that kind of gameplay, like kind of really appeals to someone like me. I think that's really cool.
Well, I'm hoping that the higher complexity ones could appeal to someone like you, and the lower are easy to play. And I'm here to tell you that I ran the demo for the distributors, and legitimately, they got the powers more than like the basic actions on their basic action cards for Pathfinder. Like they were no problem using the powers where they're like, okay, now I stride, how many spaces do I move? Or like trying to figure out like some of the other things they could do with their third action were trickier. Now, a part of that is, and I suggest this in the book, just directly in the text, that I made note cards for each power and gave them the note cards with the powers. And I made note cards for the other actions like sudden charge as well in a different color. I told them these ones that are yellow are powers. That means when you use them, I want you to place the card down and don't pick it back up until you refresh the power.
Right. Or tap it, which is what we do when we...
Yeah, you can totally tap it. That's fine. But they were all holding them.
So. Oh, okay.
And the Elemental Avatar players did everything right the first time. I ran 2 demos. The Eldamon trainer players mostly did. The thing is that they just wanted to use their Eldamon and their power, and they didn't ask me to phase Eldamon first both times. So I was like, okay, so we're going to want to phase in the Eldamon that has that power, and then you can use that power. And they're like, oh yeah, that's right. I forgot to do that. And so I'm going to be clear that I'm not just like, I'm going to tell you what I saw in there, and it is that they did forget that they needed to phase their Eldamon with the trainer. But the Avatar players, not even understanding the game, instantly got it, because it's kind of like what you would expect. You have a bunch of powers, you pick which one you're going to use.
Yeah. I see in the chat, David on Street says, why not check the Avatar Legends TTRPG instead of how you can make slushie? So David on Street, actually, you might have missed it, but yeah,
Derik had a good explanation.
I spent about 10 minutes exactly explaining why you might want to do this. And just so, we're clear, I absolutely adore the Avatar TTRPG, the Avatar Legends TTRPG from Magpie Games. And I think it's fantastic, and I love it. And it does Avatar storytelling really, really well. But it is not, if you want to play, when people say I want to play Avatar, some people mean I want to play the heroic journeys of young people going on a grand adventure and discovering who they are, and can they live with balance as they deal with the conflicting forces of growing up, societal pressures, and of course being a hero. Some people want to blast people in the face. I mean, that is the way that goes. So
some people just want to do the big fights where it's like all of the, like in Korra, where all of the really powerful outlaws had escaped, and they're just constantly blasting all of their different weird and unique uses of their elements, and everyone's fighting them back, and there's a large ensemble battle. They want to do that, and like that is not what most of the show is like, which is one reason why the RPG does so well. The Avatar Legends RPG does so well at mimicking the show. But if someone wants to be doing that all the time, then they may want to play a more combat-heavy RPG.
Right. I mean, Powered by the Apocalypse, Avatar Legends does introduce the combat exchange system, which is sort of revolutionary, although quite a few people hate it. I actually think it's brilliant. But by and large, right, it is not a tactical game. And so if you do want that sort of tactical experience, which a lot of people do, I mean, that's why they play games like Pathfinder 2, and they play games that D&D that have a 5-foot grid, and they have minis and they move them around or whatever. Then that's the kind of play experience that you're looking for, then yeah, I think you're going to be disappointed in the Avatar Legends TTRPG. But this, especially if you want something that's a little bit more of I guess I would call it a tactical challenge to kind of figure out how do I maximize the use of this element for my party's benefit and the enemy's detriment, that could be very compelling. So,
absolutely.
So, yeah, how you doing, Steven?
Yeah, we went
great.
through, but back to you.
I didn't do anything on this except, just come up with the concept, the idea, and lay it out and do all the art and everything else. Mark wrote it, though.
And I had, I wrote everything in this book except we had some of the sidebars and the Eldamon entries and little intros at the beginning of them. Brady Wang wrote, so you'll see that there's an additional writing credit for that. And also, I wanted to acknowledge and call out all the playtesters, at least one of whom I see is in the chat today, who came up with wonderful ideas. They were very rigorous in playtesting, getting down data, in a lot of cases, some pretty discrete data rather than just the playtesting experience, but both. And this allowed us to come up with ideas and changes that came from the playtesters too. So while I wrote it, sometimes it was because the playtesters discovered something or had an idea for something that I put into design and put out there.
But anyhow, the one thing you'll notice is that with our products is that we seem to make it endless, that you could just keep reusing them. it's like the monster part system just keeps going, forever, and it's constantly changing the way you play. And this
want to hear my real hack? It's not about airbenders, but I'm going to tell everyone here anyway. So this already has over 300 elemental powers. Like, it's a magic system with a lot of stuff in it.
Oh, and let's be clear, right? The powers are not feats. They're powers.
They are powers. They are elemental powers. So there are numerous things you can do with these other than just put them on your elemental avatar. And these are discussed at length in the book. Not like a ridiculous amount of length, but enough to tell you how to do it. For one, when an Eldamon is in you, you might become an avatar. But when it's in a monster, they might get the Eldamon infused adjustment, which gives them one of these elemental powers. Like, how easy is it to be like, I'm going to take this bear, and now it has this fire power. It's a Inferno bear. So you can easily adjust monsters. And not only that, the Eldamon have enough information about them to build them out from level 1 to 20. In fact, depending on how this is implemented, which I have no idea how it will be, it may be the case that this will be automatically done in terms of how the pets are done in like online versions, right? So there are 162 Eldamon, but some of them are different forms of the same base Eldamon. There's 54 different base forms. Multiply that by 20, and you have 1,080 creatures from level 1 to 20. Now, there's a recommendation to add 4 hit points per level to them if you want them to be like an adversarial creature, because their HP is low specifically so that you are able to like field multiple and not just be like, this is basically an Eidolon with more steps where we're kind of sharing hit points. And if you do that, this book secretly contains 1,080 stat blocks that you don't see in it that you can easily make and just be like, yeah, Eldamon are usually phased out, but this one phased in and it's angry and we're going to fight it. Or it's an ally that's going to help us out.
Holy shit. Fan of Flames is good.
Yeah. Fan of Flames is good. Like, these are good. I told you these are strong because
I'm like reading the powers. I'm like, oh shit. That's a lot of damage. That's pretty cool.
Fire is
by
crazy.
the way, just props to Mark Seifter. If you're a Nice Last Call fan, you've seen me talk about this before. I absolutely love that you built in the auto AoE scaling in that power, that the cone gets bigger as you get higher level. Like, that is like, not only is it makes sense, but like, it's just like so essential, I think, for play. And it's just like such a good mind of like, this is how the game should play, and it and it helps play it. Anyways, Anyways, I'm sorry.
So Fan of Flames is a good one. When I was running the demo with the distributors, I had enemies that were like, the opponents were wood based, and they were like sowing plants in the area, which caused difficult terrain. So one of the distributors, who was the Eldamon trainer, sent in Squirlash and did a Fan of Flames, which not only hit 2 of the enemies in it, but destroyed 6 squares of the sowed plants. And the bad guys were using those squares to basically unleash melee wood attacks at range, because they can like harvest a square to attack from that square with a very damaging power that is as damaging as a melee power would normally be. So the person who was playing is like, I'll burn it down. And that is literally, that wasn't me improvising as the GM. The rules say that when you use fire damage in one of those squares, it gets rid of them.
Yeah.
If you did 8 hours in the kineticist, just think how many hours you're going to need for these.
I mean, we might have to do it.
Looking forward to it.
I mean, these are pretty interesting. I just like, there's just like a certain, like, I mean, this is the price you pay for a 50-year-old game system, right? Like Fan of Flame. Oh, you do D6 points of damage per level bonus. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense than like ranks and, you're level 20, but you're rank 10. So it's like, this to me is just so much cleaner and smoother, in that regard. So I just prefer this style of it. And the fact, like I said, that it auto heightens is just fantastic.
I like that you don't get off levels with it. Now, it does mean that you have some levels that are good. Level 2.
Yes, very good.
Level 2 is very, very good for an elemental avatar compared to other levels. Yeah. Also, level 3, if your GM is a stinge fest and doesn't give anybody their striking weapons at any time, you're very, very in good shape at that point as an elemental avatar. That's your best moment to shine, is like between the point before anybody gets a striking weapon. But after that, it pretty much evens out with, especially like my group that I'm playtesting, it has a Magus. So every odd level, the Magus' spell strike goes up from it being a higher level spell. And every time weapons go up, it goes up from that. And so second level is my one time where I'm able to like go up there with the Magus.
As a game designer and as the game designer who built the system, do you think that let's just call it, people talk about hell levels, they talk about, the power spikes, because of the non-smoothness in some instances, because of the proficiency system and because of the way you gain access to certain abilities and DC changes. Do you think that is a feature or a flaw of Pathfinder 2?
Excellent question. And this may be a fun clip video perhaps, but I have an answer to that, because okay. I would have thought I wasn't sure, but I am sure, because guess what? During the Pathfinder 2 playtest, we actually rehauled the math like 3 or 4 times if you were playing the entire time. One of the times, like Jason came over to me and was like, Mark, these spike levels are causing problems. Let's get rid of them. And I got rid of them. The playtesters hated it. They hated that. They didn't, because before we had spike levels where you go up, but then you would, after a spike level, naturally, of course, you go down compared to the spike level over time. And so the idea that Jason brought up is like, people aren't liking the spikes are going wild. And then when they go down, they feel like they're getting worse, maybe. And so like, get rid of the spikes. We want monotonically increasing. And people did not like it. It felt like a treadmill. It was too smooth, they said. And like, they never felt like they were super good, because the secret is when you remove the spikes, you're not doing that by making people spiky all the time. You're doing that by making it like kind of average out. And so they were like saying that the things felt more samey, whereas with the spikes, there were some times that they were like, yes. And while they slowly went back down, like they still had maybe an advantage the level after the spike, and it smoothed out 2 levels later or something like that. And so I wouldn't have, despite my knowledge of talking to a lot of people online and what they say that they wanted, and analyzing the math, I think that for many of the playtesters too, because they said the spikes were a problem, they wouldn't have realized that they didn't like it either until then. But I happen to know, because we tried it, people didn't like it, we got rid of that real fast. And that is the answer that I have for you, Derek.
Yeah, I'm of two minds of it. For one, because I actually can appreciate that, especially in a game that is trying to balance things out and the way that the scaling works. So like, for example, if you've got a bunch of casters in your party and they're all level 6, that is a very different situation than one level later, when everybody's DCs are much higher. And they have access to 4th level magic or 4th rank magic.
It's huge,
right?
It's
huge difference.
It's gargantuan. It's even more than it was in the playtest at any point in time because proficiencies went up to 2.
Right. So when it used to be at 1 every was 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of 2, 4, 6, 8. And so that's just like, there's a moment where you go, not saying it's like wrong, but it's like a PL +3 at level 6 with a lot of casters is, I think, a much harder encounter than a PL +3 at level 7 with a bunch of casters.
That's definitely true because of the spikes.
Because of the spikes. But so I could see where that's like a problem from, like, certain people might find that irritation. However, I think it's okay. And the one thing that is nice about it is, like, usually the melee characters and the caster characters are kind of staggered, and so it kind of creates this like treadmill where it's like, or not treadmill, but like this undulation, this roller coaster where it's kind of like, hey, I'm level 5 melee characters and we're all celebrating how incredibly powerful we are. And sure, over level 5, level 6, the casters might feel like enemies are making their saves a lot more, and they probably are, and their ranged attacks might be kind of falling off a little bit because they don't have +1 potency runes and they're 2 points of proficiency behind. But then, hey, we get level 7 and our DC pop up through the roof and we get level access to these higher level spells. And now suddenly we feel really cool and we feel really powerful. And I think that could be a really fun trade-off that can create more of a feeling, like you said, of eliminating some of that sameness, that goes through 20 levels of the game.
And someone in chat asked, why did people miss the spikes in PF2 playtesting, not in the Elemental Avatar playtesting? Is it a different player base? No, it's because there still were spikes in the Elemental Avatar. Just because we removed the spikes in rank didn't mean that we removed the spikes in proficiency. This Elemental Avatar still has a level when their attack bonus goes up for their powers. It is not the same level their spells DCs go up, so it's not quite as spiky.
Yeah, but see, now you're double dipping, because now you're like, hey, I get a spike. I get a spike at 5. It's only for some of my powers because it's my attacks, but I also get a spike at 7.
Yeah, but it also encourages you to try something different at different times,
and that is so important. And I think that is a huge deal. And I know that a lot of people hate to hear this in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, but as Aaron Smith from our channel likes to say, he goes, and it feels kind of sometimes a little backwards because you're level 5, you're really excited, you just got rank 3 spells, you got your fireball, and his mind, he's like, level 5 and level 6 are the levels to be focused on buffing your party. Because and it's sort of like all those offensive spells that you were sort of preloaded for. Kind of, I'm not saying it's optimal, you obviously can cast whatever you want, but like, this is an opportunity to sort of visit other areas of the play style that may not rely on, say, the enemy making a save or hitting their armor class quite so much, and focus on more like, controlling spells, wall spells, illusion spells. And then level 7 or level 10, if you pick up like a shadow signet or something like that, then you could bring those offensive or those ranged attacks spells back. And then you kind of have that fun difference of experience. Yeah. So I agree with that completely.
And with the PF2 casters, you have that whole toolkit. And so you get sent to the buffs and some of those other spells. The Elemental Avatar is about attacking for the most part, and whatever other meta I said when I described your element back before. And so therefore, when I send you to look at some of your other powers, it's not going to be a utility power. They're not as high on utility as kineticists or spellcasters. It's going to be an attack roll power. Whereas the caster would be like, I can't do attack rolls or saving throws powers at this level, or spells at this level. The Elemental Avatar is like, my attack roll powers are going to be really great right now because my attack proficiency went up. This could be a good time to look at getting some attack roll powers in there.
How do you handle item bonus?
So you can get item bonus, but you never go above master in attack rolls for powers. And you do go to legendary. So basically your power attacks scale exactly like a martial, and you can use item bonus. And your power DC scale exactly like a caster, and you cannot use item bonus for them, and they go to legendary. So eventually your power attacks will be at very, very, very high level. They'll be one higher because the 3-item bonus is better than being legendary instead of master.
Right.
That's how it works. And it is actually something that I'm pretty sure on your show when we were talking about different ways to handle spell attacks and other things like that, I mentioned that you could try it with spellcasters as a house rule if you wanted to decouple their spell attack from their spell DC. Well, I tried it with our playtesters in this class because I put my writing where my mouth was and it worked out, and it seemed to be doing well. So we're doing that. And
I fundamentally, I do like this design. I think the design, I'm not saying it's like, it's not like, I'm not saying it's like a crutch, but like the true strike crutch component and even I would say the shadow signet component. I don't like that as much. I would rather, I like the kineticist approach. I like your approach. I really like that you can get, kineticist is like weird. It's like, you can get this attenuator, but it can only go to +2. It's like, look, if they're attacking, let them attack. And so, to your point, you basically, right, will end the game with an attack roll equal to, any barbarian or
any non-fighter.
Sure. Yeah.
And I guess it'll be a little better than, non-fighter marshals, except it could be a little better at certain levels than the ones who are like inventor and thaumaturge because of the fact that you are using your wisdom.
Yeah, exactly.
And so
you attack with your wisdom
for your powers, not for like if you want to bash them in with a stick or like throw a boomerang at them or something like that.
Mark, I didn't bind my soul to this death Eldamon so that I could attack with a stick. Okay, buddy.
Okay, so I want to say I was thinking the same thing. I really, really was. But in the course of 1 week, because I ran a Jewel of the Indigo Islands campaign where Linda was playing an Eldamon trainer and then ran for these distributors. Linda's Squirrel Ash with -1 strength bit for D4 -1 against a powerful opponent, dealing the last rolled maximum 3 damage, which was exactly how many hit points they had left, and won the fight. And the distributor had been using ice against the thing that was weak against cold, because like wood type is weak against like cold damage, and had gotten the boss really low and was just like, I don't know, I guess I punch it with our iconic ice elemental avatar and hit it and dropped it. I was like, okay, you smash it in with your fist, and since it was already so frozen over, it like shatters into jagged shards of ice. But like, I'm shocked by the amount that because they had a striking weapon, +1 striking weapon anyway, because they didn't really need the striking, but they needed the +1 for accuracy. So the fist attack on the iconic was actually 2d4 +1 with 12 strength. So it wasn't not as bad as the Squirrel Ash.
Hearing you talk about all these, and obviously we saw that on the screenshot that guys brought up, the elemental charts and the sort of the matrix of weaknesses and whatever it's called, strengths and weaknesses. Do you think? I mean, obviously that's core to the Pokemon experience. But do you think that like Fabula Ultima influenced that at all a little bit, like with its like vulnerability system?
Oh my god! Can we not go a single episode without you bringing up Fabula Ultima?
I know Mark was playing Fabula Ultima.
By the time that I was writing this, it was before I was aware of Fabula Ultima, because we've been playtesting it for a long time.
Right.
But it's more like similar to just any game in the genre of like monster training, monster taming, monster raising generally have some elements, rock, paper, scissors style stuff. And we also know that some people just like, especially when you're really trying to be tactical about things, can get annoyed by there being a large advantage for an elemental advantage, which is why in the Eldamon battles section of the intro, we even talk about how some purists who want to be more tactical play in a weird elemental arena field that like it puts out an aura that negates the resistances and weaknesses, so that they it's not just all about, I played the right one, so I win because I'm doing massively more damage.
Is there a feat called It's Super Effective?
There's not a feat called It's Super Effective. There's a feat called Hang in There, Eldamon.
Oh, that's pretty good.
That the pre-gen I gave to them with the distributors had Hang in There, Eldamon. So there is that. There's also Eldamon Master is a class feature because it's when you get master in your class DC for Eldamon trainer. That's like kind of right. Eldamon expertise or Eldamon expert and Eldamon master are in there.
Cool. Well, you guys want to take a look at some of these Eldamon air powers? And
show off air, because it's about airbenders.
This is about airbender, right? I mean, this is the question, right? Like, and we can ask Mark. Like, I'm curious. I have the powers pulled up.
You have the power.
I have the powers pulled up.
I have the power.
Obviously, I can see that air has backlash, gust, and wind rush as level 1 powers. I am assuming I get one of these.
You get both of those, unless you chose to get a universal power, which you probably didn't.
Okay. So I get this at level 1.
At level 1, you gain both of these powers plus the reactive power, which is where you like kind of disperse yourself into wind to escape after getting hit, which makes follow-up attacks trickier on you, and a real amazing refresh power. Given that this is your turn where you don't get to like do a big attack, it's called rushing refresh. It's 2 actions. Stride up to 3 times, you refresh your powers. If you have a fly speed, you can fly those 3 times. So there's a lot you can do. So
just so that we're clear, let's say if I can understand this.
Okay.
And I'm a big fan of player A's and game A's. Yeah. I have my elemental avatar. I'm an air focused character.
Are you first level?
I am first level.
Okay, so great.
I would have in front of me 3 +1 powers. I would have backlash gust.
Yes.
I would have wind rush.
You sure would.
And then I would have dispersing retreat. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then a rushing refresh.
And then I'd have my rushing refresh. But that's kind of I would have that in different sleeves. So the dispersing retreat and the backlash gust and the wind rush, I can use those as noted, 2 actions. I think the dispersing retreat is a reaction. And then when I'm done using that, I tap the card, I flip it upside down. It is unavailable to me. I can no longer use it. So if I use backlash gust in the first round and I love it, I can't use it again in the second round unless I use the rushing refresh, which is 2 actions to stride 3 times, which is pretty good action economy. But at the end of that 2 actions, all of my powers would essentially untap.
Right. And so we have an air elemental avatar pre-gen that I used for the distributors, who is an evil eye. So it's one of our newest ancestries. It's like an evil eye and a cyclone. It's got really great little art on that pre-gen. And so that evil eye has eye beams and can shoot out like electricity from its eye or fire. And so when refreshing, presumably would like move 3 times and then like maybe use an eye beam, or use an eye beam and then move 3 times to get farther away from the enemies. We didn't have to get to the refresh because the distributors were like really good at using powers that were super effective and in AoEs on me, even though I threw like kind of an almost severe encounter. Admittedly, they had type advantage if they played smart, and they did. So I didn't get to the refresh in that fight, but that's the general idea. If you have a good 1 action thing to do and you've got good wisdom, so that could be battle medicine, that could be something else.
Yeah,
then you can do that.
I mean, again, there's similarities to like whatever it's called, overcharging. I can't remember what the term is from Kineticist. The one where when you use it, it drops your elemental aura, and then like you have to re-up your elemental aura in order to start using your powers again. So it's kind of like there's a similarity there, but it's different, and I feel like it's a little. I mean, to me, it feels a little bit more gamey, and I say that in a good way, because I feel like you said there's a situation where when you get these powers, there's this like, can I take a turn to refresh, even though like optimally I would have all of my powers used, and then I would use my refresh and I'd get to untap all of them and get to reuse all my powers. But that may not be the case, and you might really need that power again right away, but you're gonna have to pay the price in terms of kind of a taking a turn off.
So here's the interesting thing about that optimization too.
Yeah, Jackal. Overflow, Jackal. You're right.
Yeah. So Derik, if we're thinking about this, let's pretend that we are pretty sure that if we do this well, if we do this optimally, that the fight might be over on round 3.
Mm-hmm.
After round 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's also assume it's a single target enemy. In that case, using your single target attack, which does more damage, then refreshing, then using the single target attack again on round 3, you're actually going to do more than using single target attack, then the AoE, and then refreshing. Even though if you're wrong and it goes to the 4th round and you did that, you're in not as great shape. Right. But it's not even that bad of a shape if you did that, because you still can use your AoE and be in the same position. Absolutely. And only on round 5 when the greedy refresh strategy really gets messed up, because then they have to do a second refresh, whereas the person who used all their powers would be just fine and they would be doing a second rotation.
No, I think this is a really, really cool structure. And I want to also call something out here as well. Something that I've talked a lot about on our streams is I'm assuming every element has a suite of reactive powers.
They all have 3 reactive powers, and there's a few that are universal.
So this is probably like my actual favorite part of this, because one of the things that I always talk about in my streams is Pathfinder is not a 3-action economy game. It's a 4-action economy game. Mm-hmm. And not, you get 3 actions and a reaction. And in some cases, like, don't sleep on reactions, right? Reactive strike / attack of opportunity is like better in some ways than like a regular attack. It doesn't have multiple attack penalty. And so getting the reactive, number one, it allows you to take 4 actions instead of 3. But the second thing, which I always talk about in terms of gameplay, I fundamentally believe that having reactions in your game makes for a better, more engaging combat experience, because it keeps people engaged even when it's not their turn. When you do not have a reaction and your turn is over, you can zone out. You can play on your phone. You can stare off into space, because the game is basically telling you there's nothing for you to do here. Having a reaction automatically makes you more engaged in the combat, because you're going to be thinking, you know, is this an opportunity for me to use my reaction? If I use my reaction now, do I not have my reaction later? So not only do they get them, they get several of them, but they start with one. And that is so cool.
That is exactly what I was thinking when I pretty much exactly the reason why they start with the reactive power. Because like standardly, especially if you're like, I want to ease people in, I don't want it to be as hard to play. And it was easy enough for the distributors that I demoed it to play, but you might be like, well, let's give them the reaction at level 2 so they have some time to get used to it. But I was like, I want them to know that they have a reaction. I want that to be something they start using so they don't get used to not using it. And I want to make sure they can use their reaction. So Derik, I'm sure you'll love the feat that lets you get 1 free reaction per turn that can be used for your elemental reaction, and another one that gives you an additional prepared one that has to be a reaction. Because normally you're allowed as an avatar to prepare more reactions at the expense of actions, but it's usually not a good idea, right? Because it makes your rotation go too quickly. But when you can get an extra one for free and then use multiple reactions per turn to use it, that you could even get a reaction from an archetype. Yeah. Mix that in there too.
Yeah, a lot of people in the Knights of Last Call community have been playing a lot of free league games lately, particularly Forbidden Lands and Dragonbane. And those games have this idea where you get 2 actions on your turn, and one slow, one fast. But if you don't use them up, or you haven't had your turn yet, then potentially when people attack you, you get your turn, you get your actions back at the top of the round. And when people attack you, you can spend your actions on other people's turns to dodge or to parry. And there's some, talents or feats that kind of let you get some of those bonus actions. And I just think it's a very compelling gameplay. And I think that, this could create a scenario where, once you have a couple of these reactive powers and you've got your other powers, your character will feel and will be much more present in the fight, because in the combat, because you're just going to have so many different options available to you. So yes, I do like the sound of that feat.
I think there is a build that people didn't try it, where you even go heavy on reactions and then you refresh most turns, because of the fact that you're using you refresh super fast and use multiple reactions on multiple turns. For me, I like playing the efficiency where I use my full rotation and having it be as long as possible. I probably would take the feats to have a second one and to be able to use an additional reaction per turn, then maybe even archetype into some other reaction, or use a shield and get shield block. I've got an elemental shield. That's a free feature, so maybe I don't need to do that. But I love having as many reactions as I possibly can.
And I'm assuming here, as we look at this page that we've had up, I'm assuming that most, if not all, powers are 2 actions, or
they're all 2 actions or 3 actions, except for the ones that are a reaction.
Got it. So there's no 1 action powers.
No, 1 action power would be a huge mistake.
Yeah,
it would be a huge mistake for every possible reason.
Yeah. You could refresh and use it on the same turn, and it would lead to a potentially degenerate play pattern.
Well, and not only that, but it also it would either be so strong that the obvious best thing is to take half of your things as 1 action and do 1-2 refresh or something like that, or it would be so weak that it would just cause you to refresh sooner and you have more unsatisfying turns, or it would be exactly balanced, in which case you still have more unsatisfying turns because your turn is exactly balanced with doing an off action. It's fine. It doesn't feel that good, too good or too weak, but then you're still refreshing way faster because you have them. And so just in terms of balancing the longevity before you're forced to refresh, it's not good to have a way out there that you can burn through it twice as fast, even if it's balanced.
Now, going back to the page we got up here. So I'm a level 1 character. I start with Backlash Gust, Wind Rush. I've got the reaction dispersing retreat. And I have my refresh power, which is rushing refresh, which lets me stride 3 times and untap all my powers, or refresh my powers.
Sure. Or redraw them if they're cards and you played them.
However you
Whatever you want to do.
Now,
take them from your discard pile.
My cool air, my Ang 2.0 gains a couple levels. I'm now level 3.
Okay.
Do I get Disrupting Gust and Wind Sniper?
You pick one, and you can then prepare your choice of 2 out of the 3 that you have.
Got it. Okay.
Each day you can change it. There's also a fun feature later on where you prepare 2 sets, and at the start of the fight, and when you refresh, you can swap which set you have. So you can have the solo sets versus the AoE set, or you can do something else with that. There's even a wild thing you can do later on where you transcend the limits of your power. And so you're still a fire avatar, or let's say you're still a cold avatar, but you make it so cold that it's super conductive. And so it causes electric sparks to come out, but it's a cold element power, not an electric element power. And so you add in things potentially from a second element that you cause based on your element, and not by being someone who controls multiple elements.
So then, and again, I don't know how multi-elementaling works, but it's
only at level 15 when you get the transcend ability.
So
only then you can become an avatar.
I would have these 2 starting powers, and then I'd pick up 1 at 3, 1 at 5, 1 at 7. And I'm assuming, by the way, at 7, I could take the other 5 if I didn't.
You sure could. And don't sleep on the fact that Reflect Projectiles, the second reactive power, is at level 5.
Sure.
And that Wind Barrier, this is the second refresh power, is at level 7. So if you want to be able to just give yourself +4 to AC against projectiles and reflect them back on your enemy, you could pick that at level 5. If you want to be able to make a giant Wind Barrier that causes massive penalties to any kind of ranged attack that's coming against you, and keep in mind, that's different than giving yourself a bonus. So if you take both of these, ranged attacks are not going to happen well on you. Meanwhile, you're incredibly mobile, and so maybe ranged attacks are the only thing they can use on you. And so it's great for dodging around.
But so by the time I'm 20th level, then I will have a portfolio of 13 powers?
So you would have gained 11 in the sense that we just talked about. However, your transcendent powers that you start with when you transcend your element will give you I believe 3 more. Let me see about that. Yes, they will give you 3 more. So you will actually have 14 for sure. And then you may have taken feats to give you more. In fact, if you took the one that lets you have an additional reactive power prepared at all times for free, not counting against your prepared ones, then you probably then that gives you also a reactive power. So you can do the same for refresh. So a typical avatar will probably have somewhere between 14 and 16, but there's even feats that can give you more than that if that's what you want to be focused on.
Yeah, I mean that's again, I feel like that is a more manageable number. One of the things I've often talked about is that the high level Pathfinder 2 sorcerer who has I don't know 40 40 spells in their repertoire, God even forbid the wizard who has to pick
hundreds.
Hundreds to pick from, and then they have to pick 35 unique each day. It's a lot. It's a lot to ask.
At high levels, you will have 14 of them, or maybe more if you took feats, right? But you'll have at least 14.
Yeah, that feels like the perfect number. Honestly, it feels like the perfect number to me.
Assuming that you just take as many active powers as you're allowed to do, and then one reactive and one refresh, and you didn't take the feats to get more of those, right? At level 20, since you get 2 sets of powers to prepare, then you will be preparing 2 sets of 4 active, 1 refresh, and 1 reactive each. And you could have the same power in both sets if you love it so much that you're just like, this is my strongest one. Oh, I forgot about your ultimate power. So one of your powers is ultimate, so you automatically get that. And so that's the one you gained at level 19. So that's actually one fewer that you have to decide from. You can only use those once every hour, and they are outrageously out of control, but they're more highly limited. So for air, your choices are Kama Itachi or Aeolus.
So I can summon a big bug. No, I'm just kidding. Or I can summon.
No, the bug is the Eldamon. That's not power. Okay. So Aeolus calls forth powerful winds from the wellspring of elemental air that carry forth your allies and slice your foes into pieces. In a line up to 60 feet wide and 1,000 feet long, you and your allies are unharmed, and if willing, you can move them any distance along the line's path. Enemies in the area take a bunch of slashing damage. And that is how Aeolus works. And then Kama Itachi is a dust devil with the tenacity of a legendary weasel that just kind of moves around and keeps basically attacking your enemies every round, and potentially can pick up your allies and move you to an advantageous position, like if it goes through your space or your ally's space during its movement.
Yeah, I mean, Aeolus, that seems like a high level power, me and all my allies do. I mean, that's what we call like an army killer, right? Because I mean, assuming you're level 19, 20 d8 slashing damage to an fairly long area. You want to make sure that they're lined up.
Yeah, well, hopefully for them, they're a troop and they have a chance to survive it from that. Although it's still very good against a troop. Don't get me wrong.
And then obviously, like you said, it's an AOE kind of teleport too, right?
21 d8 slashing damage.
Well, that's at level 20.
That's at level 20.
Assuming level 19.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Come on. Come on.
Okay, sorry.
And yes, Knots, Druid and Cleric are the worst because they actually have access to all of their spells.
Yes. And Druid and Cleric is really outrageously bad, especially after we errata to make it clear that they get every spell that is ever published by anyone ever that is common, instead of at least being limited to the core book. That's like impossible for new players to handle. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times the way they handle it is by new players self-restrict their books. But I've seen optimizers be like, no, you shouldn't be preparing that. There's this other common spell that you can have, and you have all of them. So you should take that one.
Well, that's very cool. I mean, obviously I don't want to we don't have to go through every single thing here, but I mean,
no, you'll do that on your stream.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, when I think about these, and now obviously, again, like you said, it is a different tone, like we think about this reactive dispersing retreat, and, you literally disperse into the air, right? It's got the magical trait. You disperse into a thin form. So you literally become like gaseous, I guess would be kind of the way I would describe it. Right. Then you re-solidify after you sort of float away and, avoid provoking reactive attacks and all that other stuff. That is not something that you would traditionally see a bender do in Avatar.
That's right. It's not exactly the same, just like Kineticist. And both Kineticist and Air Avatar have easier access to flying. You don't have to be Zahir and face great personal tragedy in order to be able to fly.
Empty and become
empty, and then you can fly. It's in fact air kineticists in Rage of Elements are ridiculously good at flying for the entire party. Elemental avatars are good at flying too, not quite as much because they're not as utility as kineticists overall. But it's a little more magical in general because you'll turn into air and you will summon a ridiculous dust devil or make that 1,000-foot line 60 feet wide. It's more than what most of the benders do on their usual scale at high levels. But you could also claim that maybe the benders were never at level 19, I guess.
That's possible.
I mean, Kyoshi did like a giant earthquake.
Avatar kind of breaks the rules, though. So
okay. I'm just saying.
I mean, to be fair, this is an elemental avatar.
It is. It's an elemental avatar. You're an avatar of one of the Eldamon.
Listen. This is your opportunity. You ever say to yourself, "What's the number one problem? What's the number one problem with wanting to play Avatar: The Last Airbender?" Right? For a lot of people, not for me, but for a lot of people. Who gets to be the Avatar? Now you all get to be the Avatar.
In the demo, I had 3 different elemental avatars. There was air, there was the ice, and there was mind.
Do you think that is you think that could be too much if like you have a bunch of avatars in one group?
I don't think so. But it is true that while they have very different play styles, if your whole group is only them, there are certain things that maybe you won't be doing. But some of them synergize fiendishly well. Like I had a game going where we had ice and wood, and the enemy was melee, right? It was in like a cavern system. And the wood Eldamon kept making difficult terrain while the ice Eldamon lowered the movement speed of the enemy. Mm. And either of them individually could have really made it annoying for the enemy because we did keep retreating backwards through the tunnels. Like we had a running fight that was doing that. But together, the enemy was not, in one case, like not even able to attack us because if we got lucky and we froze them for a lot and the difficult terrain was around, then their movement speed wasn't even enough to reach us in 3 actions because of the synergy. Now, if they made their save against the cold or like went around a corner and used better strategies, there were ways that could work, but it was actually a bug monster and it was not
the most tactically minded.
Not the most tactically minded creature of all time. So like it was a very satisfying combination. So some combinations are not as good, like using fire after you've already frozen something and then melting the ice, or using fire after you planted the seeds and destroying the seeds, which was great in my demo game when the bad guys were wood and the fire destroyed it, but maybe not so much when your allies are like, wait, that was my wood. You destroyed my little saplings.
Yeah. I mean, it all looks very good. Now, keep in mind, there's there's 12, 16?
There 15? Are 13 elements.
13 elements in the book. But you guys said that there's maybe more?
There's 7 more that exist in the world, and they are mentioned in the book. They are not in this book because that would be even more outrageous.
Expansions, got it. Okay.
The elements that exist other than that are spirit and body, which go with like mind, spirit, body, and kind of life, or which are kind of like.
I'm saying because I mean, if you want to talk about over the top anime style Pathfinder 2nd edition, which a lot of people seem to enjoy. I mean, having a time or space avatar.
Those are 2 of the other ones. Spirit, body, time, space, poison, metal, and music are the ones that are not in this book. And the poison element is not as bad as you probably think it is, Derik. It's actually good. You probably are like, I am going to pre-rate the poison as an F because
I didn't say that.
I'm just making it up. But most poison things have a lot of problems. They do. The poison element, if you want a real preview of how they work, World of Battlezoo Indigo Isles has an archetype for like martial characters that guard poison Eldamon trainers. Yeah. And their poison ability gives you a sneak preview, which is that it's either poison damage or acid damage, depending on which is better for the situation, because it can eat through things on the outside or poison them from the inside. So if you're fighting a construct, for example, then you can just eat through their body with the acidic nature of the poison. And that is how you solve the problem, which is that like 15% of the bestiary is immune to poison entirely.
Right. Especially in certain campaigns too. No, I mean, it's there's a lot of room for expansion there. The music avatar would be kind of interesting. But I mean, the fact that there's 13 already to be get, and again, just going through and some of these other power sets, they're all so different. And a lot of stuff that Mark was saying too, as I read through this, like, when some of the more complex ones where you're, managing the, a kind of almost a unique resource that sort of is kind of that you have to track, or is that now part of the game that you wouldn't have to otherwise do, like the Shrouded for the darkness.
Darkness is probably the most complex, only because dark and light are complex in the game. What the darkness Eldamon is actually doing is not too bad, but since light and darkness were already hard, that we put it at high complexity for sure.
Yeah.
Whereas ice, the thing that you have to do is very easy to understand. We put that at high complexity because your group has to be tactical past the Leroy Jenkins point to make the best use out of ice, because otherwise, like, slowing the enemy's movement speed doesn't matter if everyone's like, charge, and then they just rush at the enemy with slowed movement speed. You're gonna be a little sad. You still do pretty good damage. Like, the damage is fine. It's not as good as some of the other ones. It's fine. But even if you perform well enough, you're probably gonna get annoyed or frustrated if all of your added effects do nothing because everyone just charges the things. So that's why it's high complexity, because some of it is complexity for your group's tactics. Life is high complexity just because an at-will healing ability that does not break the game with infinite healing is guaranteed to be a little bit more difficult to apply and use than damage. So life gets into that complexity. And then what's the other one that's high complexity? There's like one there. I think there's one more that's listed at high, or maybe those are all of them. Let me see. I said ice, I said life, I said wood, because you're stowing and harvesting, and you have to keep track of the squares where you did that.
Basically, Mark figured out a way to put Agricola into his TTRPG.
Or you could say it was Spirit Island.
It's a harvest phase. Don't forget to feed.
Take your harvest phase.
Don't forget to feed. Don't forget to feed your party.
I mean, one of the wood Eldamon is like a happy pumpkin, harvest pumpkin that gets extra bonuses when it's harvesting because it throws a harvest celebration.
Oh,
I disapprove of that.
You're not entertained, Derik.
But Derik, you're gonna remember because his name is Peepkin.
Oh,
and you've now remembered. You said you remembered 3 of the 4 plushies that you have.
I did know 3.
Do you remember the cat now that we just said it before the show?
Cat. It's not like Kitopolis, but it's something
close. It's Kitopaz, like the gem Topaz.
Yeah,
Topaz. Yeah. Oh, I don't even have a Kitopaz here.
Oh,
what about the air elemental?
Derik didn't have that, so he didn't name it or not name it.
It's like, is it like Bat Free or something?
It's Terrapoof.
Terrapoof. I like to call him
Terrapoof, which is spelled Tair.
I like to call him Fluffernutter.
Terrapoof.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to like here. I mean, it is absolutely a complex class. When you combine and you're saying this is the lesser of the two.
Well, I mean, if you're looking at the power,
this is the easier one.
This is the easier one.
I would say this.
It's not that hard.
I have taught many different classes to people who don't know how to play. I have not yet taught an avatar to kids, but I can guess based on inexperienced adults. The elemental avatar class is actually easy to play. The class looks complex when you're looking at it in the book because you're used to spellventing and spellcasting, and you're used to how other classes work. To build your first character, that can be tricky. You don't I wouldn't say your 6 to 8 year old will easily be able to build their first elemental avatar by opening up this book and reading it. But if you build it for them, and to be clear, like we said with Derik, you just have all the first level powers that are there. You don't even have to make any choices. you could get a universal power. There are choices to be made, but by default, you don't have to make any choices. The book even has a thing in the introduction that's a quick start guide that just says, hey, quick, go grab these on these pages. And if you build it for them, I am very confident that a young kid can play this class. If you write down, like you were saying, you have to tap or to lay it down onto note cards, these powers. Because I saw the distributors who did not know Pathfinder play it. So if you have a young player or an inexperienced player who already knows how to play Pathfinder, the elemental avatar is actually easier to play than many of the existing Pathfinder classes. The trainer, not as much, because it has multiple things that you can, they're pets. Pet classes are always going to be a little more complicated.
Yeah,
but looking at the powers, those are the powers for both classes.
That's what I play in every game is a pet class.
That's Steven.
Let me think about that.
I wanted to do this. I love pet classes.
No, I have, when I think about like D&D, but also like MMOs, I never go with a pet class.
Yeah, they're complex, and I understand that you have
Derik is
you
not
have
a pet
trouble
guy.
with complex, items.
No,
Derek,
He hates cute
when
things,
I see you, I'll teach you how to play.
Like necromancers and EverQuest were, very powerful, and they had a skeletal companion.
You're right; it's not cute at all.
It's not cute at all.
And
or
hunters,
mages, which were very powerful. Yeah, like
OP and WoW have been, always will be, and always will always be OP. Period. End of story.
Yeah, but like Per is talking about the D2 Necromancer. Is the AFK class. I mean, I liked the Paladin in Diablo 2, and I liked the Assassin Diablo 2.
Well, pet classes are also infamous. You see, this is what's fascinating, and this is Mark and I talked about this way back in the beginning. Is I think pet classes are very hard or nearly impossible in a TTRPG because you have to split your stats and abilities between two people, and then you end up with two weak characters instead of one strong character, which is a real problem.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I know it is, and but we kind of took care of that because you're only playing one character, even when you're pet class.
We're phasing in, which it's
like
when Ash sends in Squirtle, but it's also like when Yuna in Final Fantasy X is like, I'm out. Come on in, Bahamut. You're going to be fighting for a while.
So it's only one class. There's one character, so you can make them very strong. And you're out, and your Eldamon is in, and they fight for you. So
yeah, I mean, again, I think the summoner earns its chops in Pathfinder 2, and I think that they did a good job.
I had to work very hard. I had to work very hard on that class to make it work.
Yeah,
but there was a lot of technical things.
Yeah, it kind of works, Mark. Like, and you should take this as a compliment. And it's kind of surprising that it does. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's like because like when you first read like what is it called? All for One. It's not called All for One.
Act Together.
Act Together. You read that at first and you go, huh? Like what?
Like most people, like why does it say this instead of just saying you have another action that you divide?
Correct.
It's like this is very important that you cannot take two action activities, and that is entirely why it is worded that way.
Correct, and it's not entirely intuitive that is the case. Pathfinder 2 could have benefited sometimes, I think, from a little designer sidebar notes where they say, hey, here's why this class is designed this way.
Yeah, but keep in mind,
you see them in?
Keep in mind, Summoner, it does work, but there's other reasons. The other issue is that it also takes up space in the battlefield. You have multiple, I like to have it cleaner where it's like one for one.
Derek, when you were on the air, the first spread, did you see the sidebar on the right that's like fortune attacks, effects, and power attack rolls? I sprinkled in some commentary about things.
I saw the yellow bars there outside of just the key terms, but yeah, I did see the thing about the fortune rolls. Yeah.
So when do we expect to get this amazing book?
That's a super chat from Jeremy McCutcheon.
Next week.
Ooh.
Yep. We're waiting for like one piece of art.
I'm waiting for one piece of art. And about the business one, I changed it the last second just because the Avatar came out today, and I thought it would be good timing, and the book's about to come out. We can do that one. I'll do that one.
I think we should do that one next week because it's an interesting topic.
That topic's not going anywhere, so I can talk about that topic any week. And
I want to hear your take on it too, because it's a fascinating situation, especially with Evil Genius. But let's do that next week.
Well, yeah, that's kind of where it came from, because
is that the company that grossly mismanaged themselves and
that had 1.5 million?
I guess they're not out of business yet.
Oh no, they're going to be. They have a whole presentation at Gamma.
They certainly have lost a lot of key people, including people that I know and trust, who have left for a variety of reasons. We can talk about that next week's episode. It'll be a good show.
Yes, they're the ones who hired 30 people, and let me tell you, and it got $1.5 million. I didn't even have 30 people when I was making way more than that, so in my company. So I don't know.
Mirtos had another super chat.
Well, then we had more. Late. Let me talk.
He had more.
Where's my podcast? Right. The agents, they are, well, okay, it's not a podcast right now, but it is on YouTube, so you can watch them and listen to them, and all of the shows keep going. I just haven't gotten around to converting them to podcasts, but you can listen to YouTube's as podcasts. So those are live shows, and we missed one episode last week. Chris got COVID. He never had COVID before, so we had to cancel. And then this week I was in Washington, so I couldn't do it. And next week we have a show, but then the week after I'll be at Gamma. So, but yeah, it's moving. It's moving along. They're level 5. Sorry, they're level 5. They're level 16, the 5th book.
That's a lot higher than level 5.
They're a little higher than level 5. They're crushing at level 16. Holy moly!
Is that the opposite of level 5?
They're doing a lot of damage. I'm like sitting there just stunned. Everything's in the 80s and 90s every round, every time they attack. It's just ridiculous. So, will Pathbuilder have it? Yeah, of course. We're working on figuring out how to get this into Pathbuilder. And
obviously, it's a large undertaking.
And we're talking to Red Razors a bit. It's not gonna come out right away, because we might have to have some special. We might have to have some special code written. We're still figuring it out. This one's gonna take a little while, because there's the problem is we kind of broke the system and invented all this new functionality. So we either have to figure out how to get it into Pathbuilder, or have some new functionality built. So we're working on it. It'll be there. It'll be there. Just give us some time.
Yep.
Cool.
So I'm very, very excited, and I'm happy because the people we've shown this to, including people who aren't as familiar with tabletop RPGs, have all looked at it and been very excited by it, and had a lot of great ideas about things we can do with it. And so I'm hoping that everyone will be using it and talking about it, and I'll engage in conversations with people, because I have worked on this for a very long time at this point. So I'm really excited to bring it to you and seeing the joy that people have playing it, because that's what energizes me to do game design.
Yes, and you do want to get it now, because we're going to raise the price when it comes out, because
the price of this is ridiculously low.
Yeah, so
it probably was a little low, or I guess a very good deal, even when Steven first put the price on it, given how long it was. I think he didn't realize how long it was, maybe. And given today's standards for shipping and book costs and other things like that, the pre-order price is a steal. So you should definitely grab it now. I'm saying that not just as the person who wrote it, but also just as a consumer who likes getting things when they're on a deal, or that they're at a good price, and buys a lot of my stuff in Humble Bundles or Steam sales. This is the time.
Yeah, it's in Battlezoo.com right now. You can get it. And let's see. Yeah, the avatar works. It's actually super tricky, and I'll tell you why. Because anyone can befriend Eldamon, so we have to have it work. Just getting the classes in, that's pretty straightforward. But then we're going to get
Steven partially read the chat, partially not. So for people watching at home who didn't do the chat said that Avatar works in Pathbuilder, but the trainer doesn't. And that's what he's talking about now.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, but I was saying is that the trainer works as is, but there's basically, you can be a fighter and befriend Eldamon. You could be a wizard and befriend Eldamon. Anyone can befriend Eldamon. So we got to make it work for everyone, not just trainers. So it's a little complex. So the 5e version's done too. 5e version's done. It's coming out the same day.
There's a super chat that said, "Thanks for all your creations. I cannot wait to get my hands on this. I am glad that you're excited."
Yeah.
And yeah, Math Guy Dave, absolutely. 5E is done. They're both waiting on the same piece of art, but they're done. They're copy fit. With 5E, we were able to get the spirit and the feel of all these elements and their play styles into 5E so well that I will now tell a little story from our Discord. Here's the story. 2 people on the Discord were chatting, and I got a sense based on the use of the word subclass, which some people in the PF2 community use, but is a key rules term in 5E, that one of the players was in 5E, where the other one, it was clearly in PF2. And I was talking to both of them. They talked to me and each other for like, I don't know, like 20, 30 posts before I said, okay, so for you, this is 5E, right? And then that person was like, yes. And the other person was like, no, I'm PF2. I was like, I know. And they were like, whoa, wait, we were playing the different version of this. It was translated so well. They managed to have a conversation where they gave cromulent and good advice to each other throughout it, even though they were playing the different version of the game. Now, there are definitely changes. One of the big things that I went through with our 2 converters was we had some spreadsheets that somebody who did a lot of 5E work themselves, who was looking at our dragon book and gave me some spreadsheets that they had made of calculating damage for various types of characters in 5E. And so we compared and contrast, and because 5E hit points and damage are lower, it turned out that we definitely had lower damage than in Pathfinder 2. Like, you wouldn't deal as much damage in 5E as in Pathfinder 2. But we had to make a choice on where we were calibrating the damage, because in Pathfinder 2, like, the difference between your like highest damage fighter build and like maybe like an outwit ranger who is better at armor class and skills and did not get extra damage is there, but it's not like so outrageous that the outwit ranger basically doesn't exist. Whereas when I looked at the spreadsheets for 5E, it was like, depending on which of my rogue subclasses I picked, some of them did like almost triple as much damage every round as the other ones did. And so we had to decide which one to use as the benchmark. And we decided to use a benchmark that was more based on like not the most bleeding edge damage you could possibly do with the subclass that did the most, that was out of line with the other martial classes, but something that was more in line with the baseline throughout the 5E at-will classes. And we looked at what the spellcasters could do, made sure it was a little less than their best spells, because those spellcasters are limited. You're not, but you do have to refresh. And it worked out to be actually about half as many dice as the Pathfinder 2, but 1 die size higher in many cases. Not all cases, but that was like a good rule of thumb that was very interesting, because it basically was supposed to be like slightly more than half by a certain amount. So I found that very fascinating in working on the 5E, but we worked very hard to make sure that it worked great in both versions.
Which I know Derik appreciates.
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably, once it officially launches, I mean, I'll dive into it. I'll do it all. I'll do an all Eldamon tier ranked.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I want to see what your rank is for the different elements.
Yeah.
Like, I have a feeling that you might rank the ones, in some cases, rank some of the lower complexity ones higher, because of the fact that their use case is like more guaranteed that you're going to get them.
Ye of little faith, Mark.
We'll see.
I evaluate on the potential ceilings, but I also evaluate on the floor. Right.
Right. And that's why I'm not being faithless of you. I think because you evaluate on the floor that the simpler ones will get a better rating, because the floor on the more complex ones is lower if your party bungles ice, then you can't do the ice's best stuff.
But if the ceiling is higher, then that has to be taken into consideration.
Fair enough. That I'm looking forward to it, because the ceiling on ice, which is hard to hit, but that I've seen before a few times.
The use case that you described, right, sounds very, very, and
we literally took no damage from a severe encounter, because it was the absolute perfect storm of the best thing we could have done.
Right. One of the things I often complain about is just that when people evaluate feats or powers or spells in any TTRPG that's more crunchy and tactical is they don't look at the floor. They always are imagining this best case scenario.
It's a white room.
Yeah, where everything is perfect and all the monsters are packed into a fireball formation, or whatever like that. Like that's and that you shouldn't discount that, particularly if it's something that you can work towards or build around. But you should also be looking at sort of the average use case and the potential worst use case when you're trying to evaluate sort of how well this is going to perform for you, assuming that you care at all about the tactical component of the game.
Right.
If you're just like, woo, then it doesn't matter.
I mostly, but don't entirely agree with that statement that you made. I think that the extremes are what people focus on, not just the white room maximum, but the worst case scenario your GM is out to get you situation. I think people do hyper focus on. They're like, what if every enemy I face for 13 levels is immune to everything I can do? Like, so they look at like extreme worst and perfect best, but they don't look at what you said, the average case, or even like a slightly below average. It's not a catastrophe, but I also wasn't able to play it to its best situation because the monster was farther away and I didn't have enough actions. This happened to me with my fire avatar multiple times, is that I because of my high wisdom and perception, I went first. And so I would do something cool. Like maybe we would defeat the enemy that was here. There was another enemy over there. And then it would be my second turn. So I would be like, well, okay, I'm not really in range. I'm going to like move part of the way there and like raise my elemental shield or something like that. And then like the barbarian would be like, I'm running all the way over to the other side. And then on my next turn, because I raised my shield instead of also running all the way over as far as I could go, I actually was unable to use a power again. And so that was something that was it was not the GM throwing immune enemies to my powers. It was something that was outside of the white room of bad or good, but was instead somewhere in the middle where real stuff happens. So I mostly agree with you, but I do think people get obsessed with the really worst case too.
Sure. Yes, of course. But and again, that's also a very bad way to evaluate things as well.
Oh yes.
But in any case, yeah, we'll probably do that. Someone said, Jacob said there has to be a cuteness rating. That sounds like a good tip goal for one of my live streams. Jacob, is get Derik to not only rate the power on its efficacy and its usefulness and its utility and its overall power potential, but also take a look at its component Eldamon and give them cute ratings.
There you go. Force Derik to do that. I think people would love it. Also, a super chat from Jeremy McCutcheon says, YouTube is hard to listen to if you're away from good internet. The shows help to make the day go fast while working out in the field.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad to help make it go faster when you're working out in the field, searching for Eldamon out in the field, befriending them.
That was always something that was really surprising to me. We never really got that much traction on our audio podcast that we used to put out on Anchor, and it would go to Spotify and stuff. But a lot of people said that, because of the limited internet availability that they had, or they didn't have unlimited data plans or whatever, the idea of just being able to like stream YouTube all day to listen to these, especially ours, 2 or 3, 4 hour streams was not really practical. So like the podcast format was really nice because they could download it, at home and then just have it available.
I listen to your podcast all the time. I'm just too late. I just don't have enough time, man. That's the problem.
I mean, listen, you and me and everybody else.
Well, I did for 5 years. I had no problem, but now, before I was like doing books.
Well, you got me for 5 more minutes, give or take. So
there we go.
I gotta go too.
Well, now you've committed to looking at the elements and doing an element.
I'm curious. I mean, look, I don't know.
Right after dragons.
I don't know if you all have noticed this. I'm sure you have. There hasn't exactly been a lot of Pathfinder 2 content that's been out there because we're kind of in this in between.
We're in the remaster rush, so we're about to get the monster core, but that obviously delayed a bunch of things to get the player core, GM core, and monster core. It was miraculous that they got them as fast as they did. That is so much work. I know how much work that is to put all that together.
And and so there hasn't been a lot of new releases except for the core. And then here's the thing: you might say, "Oh, but they released the core." Well, yeah, but no. But isn't the tagline is? But they didn't change anything, right? So like they delayed all their schedule so that they could release something that isn't that different.
Derik, does the game remain the same?
What's that?
Does the game remain the same?
Does the game remain the same? I mean, according to them, it certainly does. Obviously, there's certain changes that they made, but by and large, right, the idea is that most of these changes are cosmetic or editorial in nature, and they're not really like fundamentally restructuring the game. But obviously, they had to do that or felt they needed to do that for their company position. So as a result, we haven't gotten a new thing since since Rage of Elements, and so, and even other content creators, not just myself, I saw Rules Lawyer was doing a video on the changes from second edition AD&D to third edition AD&D the other day. And I said, well, I was like, well, that sounds cool. I mean, obviously I know what they are, but I was like, I never expected to see that on that channel ever.
That's scraping the bottom, but that's a pretty,
but so anyways, it's fun to get into.
So if you're at a content light time, it's a good time to rank the elements. I'm actually curious now that you've specifically said that ones like ice that you have to work for it are going to not get penalized. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I can guess what the Derik ranking is going to be.
Let's be clear here, Mark. The juice has to be worth the squeeze. You know what I mean? Like if this thing is asking me to jump through a bunch of hoops and it's giving me something, but what it's giving me, in my opinion, isn't useful enough given the thing that I come with, then it will still get. It will still get.
Fair enough. And to be fair, the amount of damage you lose is usually not an awful lot, right? Like it's like the pre-gens I made, which were level 3. They were like sacrificing 2 damage on their AoE to give movement speed penalties that could stack with other movement speed penalties, for example. So they, you don't lose that much damage, but you do have to work to make that movement speed penalty matter because of the fact that even though you can stack it up to a minus 25-foot penalty, which they're not going anywhere, like if your party is next to them, then they won't mind that they're not going anywhere.
So, real quick, what's I going to tell you, Derik? I cannot remember. Oh, there's one more impressive aspect of this that we never talked about. This is Orc. How about that?
Yeah, well, it's its own spell system, so it was easy enough. The only part of the entire conversion that was a little bit rough is that there's a way to use your Eldamon that is not the normal way. That is, you're kind of incarnating them, and it's very similar to the incarnate spell trait. And so it was better when we could use the incarnate spell trait. And in Orc, you can't, because that's in Secrets of Magic, which is not an Orc product. So even though Paizo owns it, and presumably will reproduce it the moment they want to do an incarnate spell again, currently they have not. And so we had to redo that as like a sidebar that is slightly different. And honestly, it was never exactly the same because it wasn't a spell anyway. It was just close to the incarnate spell trait. And other than that, it was most like Paizo said, things don't have to change a lot. And when you're not using spells, it turns out, and that would have changed, and you're making your own powers, barely changed. Void and Vitality were the new names for positive and negative damage. Like we changed the name of some of the class features. We changed Flat-footed to Off Guard, but like it was tedious to go through because you don't want to just do a find replace. That's how you get Da Wizard instead of damage, because you replace Mage with Wizard. Da Wizard as all one word, DAWIZARD. So it was it took a while, but it was not difficult. And Paizo was right that like it barely had an effect. Even the one thing that did, I'm sure within like 3 or 4 or 5 books, they'll put out an incarnate spell and then it'll be back in the game again and you'll be able to do it for Orc.
Well, I look forward to, and we over here at Knights of Last Call, we go live 2 to 3 times a week. Our streams are theoretically 2 hours, but they often go longer. In fact, the joke is that I usually say I'm wrapping up at about 2 hours, and I usually finish about 45 minutes later. But I think it's fun, and I think it's exciting, and it's been a while since we've had like a kind of a crunchy PF2 release that wasn't ancestries, or they could like to get a whole new system that's like a real different way of playing the game. So yeah, we'll probably take a look at it. I think it's worth a spin. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've got Northern Reaches season 3 coming up. And
you might allow it in Northern Reaches season 3.
I
might.
I'm sure Derek's going to ban the Eldamon themselves because he doesn't want creatures in there, but he can allow the avatar easily enough. He's the exact person I made this for.
The number one thing that the people want was a circus. Okay, so sometimes you gotta bow to the whims of the people. Oh yes. They wanted a circus. They wanted a coffee shop. Like one of the most popular places was this like RP bar where people would go and just talk in character. Listen, my patrons they are not a monolith. Okay. They are a wide, diverse group of people, all who disagree with me fundamentally. And that is really important.
They all think I'm wrong about everything.
Maybe they agree with you like a small percentage of the time. So they want to watch it to be like, yes, this is it. They want to get you to agree with them more because they consider you to be like a bellwether. Like, come on, we can convince Derik to agree with us about this.
Well, I also just think it's frustrating because, the people will see something and they'll agree with me. And then they'll assume that it's like, oh, well, this person is going to agree with me on everything else that I also believe. But I have such strange and unorthodox views on so many different things that it inevitably clashes with somebody. And there's this moment where they go, I don't know if I hate this person now because he's not, he's not part of my echo chamber. But, for people who are willing to sit around and stay and listen, I think that the experience can be quite benefiting. Actually, we're going to be talking. We just finished a poll while this stream was going on. And tonight we're going to be talking about 7th Sea.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
So that's going to be worth looking.
That's a fun one. Oh, Derik, you'll love this. You'll love this because you always bring it up. On the 27th, on Tuesday, on Arcade Mark, my people, actually one of the people who's in the chat right now brought it up as a write-in, voted for us talking about Fabula Ultima. So we're going to be talking about it on Arcade Mark on Tuesday. This is going to be our first time talking about another RPG. That's because I really, as someone who co-created a very major RPG, I consider it to be like difficult and a little tentative to be talking a lot about somebody else's much smaller tabletop RPG. So I want to make sure that we can focus on things that I like and not be like focusing on things that I don't like. And but Fabula Ultima has a lot of things I like, and there's enough that we like that we can talk. Linda and I can talk about it.
You're allowed to be critical, Mark. Actually,
I don't think I'm exactly allowed to be critical in the same way. Because like it's kind of like punching down to go to like say things that are critical, even if I believe that they're true about an RPG that's that much smaller. Like it's not a nice thing to do.
Yes, but also, I mean, you're not punching down, I think, as much as you think you are. I mean, it's they've won some awards, they've had their success.
They're great. I like it, and we have good things to say, but we wanted to also like make sure that we talk about a game that we had good things to say rather than ones that are like, I have what would be an interesting episode about a particular RPG that I think is brilliantly designed, but is designed exactly to be as frustrating as possible for me.
Right.
And I don't want to do that episode, which is not Fabula Ultima, of course, because I feel like that is focusing on negativity.
But but actually, Emmanuel, the author of Fabula Ultima, actually is a Knight patron. He joined a little while ago.
You mentioned that. There's two things you mentioned.
One of your Knight people said in chat that they should get him on my show.
There's something you mention in every single stream. He mentions Fabula Ultima in every single stream. And he mentions that he's a Knight patron, by the way.
Yeah.
Every time.
There you go.
Listen, it's very, I think
feels good for you.
Right, I think Emmanuel from Need Games, Rooster Games, and you all from Roll for Combat represent a really small section of the populace. Because when I talk about your books, and when I talk about Fabula Ultima, there were things that I didn't like. I mean, unlike Mark, I'm nobody. So I feel free to just say, hey, these are my opinions, and I respond this way, and I respond this way, and I feel fine for that. And I will almost never give universal praise. There will always be things that I think, even if they work, they don't work for me. But to have people, publishers, say, hey, that's okay. And I respect that, and I want to be part of your conversations, and I want to hear from you. I think that is a very a very admirable trait.
That makes sense. Now, how do you launch a poll on these? Because I want to do one that is Derik says that the creator of Fabula Ultima is one of his patrons versus Steven's brother Danny does costuming in Hollywood.
I haven't mentioned that
on the
in a
Ghostbusters movie.
No.
Which one has been mentioned more times? Only in Derik episodes. You can't count the episodes that don't have Derik. That's not fair. That's not fair to Steven.
Heads up, I lose. Steven wins. Okay, that gets because you know what? Everything we say inevitably ends up talking about Hollywood or the movies, and then
I didn't say one word about it.
I know. That was my fault this time.
But it got brought up anyway.
I didn't say anything. I still haven't. Actually, that's not true because we talked about Netflix and Last Airbender. So
you're right.
We did talk about it.
It could have come up, but it didn't.
Well, if you don't have anything else going on tonight, you can go over to Nice Last Call. Check us out.
In fact, if you don't have anything going on tonight, you can watch me playing a game of Pathfinder as a player tonight. I don't even know what it is. No one. How about that? No one knows.
Where is that happening?
Whoa! How about that? I got everyone by surprise. Is that
cross-scheduled with Derik's 7th Sea? Where is this?
This is on tonight at 9:00.
Oh, we should be done by then.
Great!
I am playing a Saga's Horror one-shot in Foundry, Dark Descent. Let's see. Here's
on what channel?
This is on one of the fans. Let's see. This is a big fan of ours. This is on Avenue Studios.
Oh, okay.
They're such big fans that I sat next to them and played a game with them and their wife and their kids, and they didn't know who I was until the very end because they kept looking at me from a profile, and then when they saw my face on, they were like, "Oh my God, you're Steven Glicker."
It's different than from the front.
I'm like, they didn't recognize me. And now
watch Derik find out more about 7th Seas, then watch Steven playing as a player because he like half the time is like a troll who trolls the other players.
Oh, I'm not a good player.
So you're going to enjoy it.
You were very good at Origins when I ran Avatar for you.
Yeah, he sounded like he was really good in the Avatar one.
I am not a well-behaved player. I'm a very good player. Yeah. I'm not a well-behaved player.
You know what? Actually, you know what though? I realized something, and then I gotta go. But like, there was a moment, and this was I think this was like a life-changing moment for Steven. I kind of saw it in his eyes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think so. I mean, again, as a game master of many
Derik
years,
changed my life in so many ways. All right.
So, number one, we're playing Avatar. Yes. And I know you don't have a ton of experience with PBTA games.
No.
Or that style of like super low prep, literally no prep, right? We didn't even have a game until we sat down that second. And so there was that moment where I could tell, you know, if this was a D20 game, an adventure or whatever, you were trying to be kind of a shit stirring, pot stirrer troll, because there was supposed to be this big fight. And then instead you went, that's not us. You've mistaken me for someone else.
Oh, I always do that. Yeah. I do that all the time.
And you were kind of laughing, and I went, "Oh, okay. Well, there's a Avatar. The game cares about when you're trying to deceive someone. So roll that thing. You rolled like 11 or something, 12. Yeah, the equivalent of natural 20. And they went, oh yeah, you just look like him. And then they're like, yeah, come on. And you were like, that. You like looked around like, wait, that worked? Like you don't care? Like you just threw out the entire adventure
that was
because
impressive.
I said something kind of trolly and you just went with it. And I was like, yeah, I don't care. And it did. It basically completely took whatever idea I had. And I just said, okay, we could set that aside because we are going in a very different direction now. Because now the Steven is a man of the people.
That was so much, yes, but it was very fun because it's like the dog who caught the car and I caught it. And I was like, oh my God,
exactly.
Now what?
Yes, exactly. That's
so Avenue Studios is in chat and says that it's a dragon game. So everyone's playing dragons and Steven's got to pick his pre-gen. So that might make you even more excited to watch it if you like dragons.
Oh yeah, I guess we'll find out. I don't know what I'm doing. I was going to invite you, Mark, if you wanted to do it, but
I probably have to eat.
That's not till 9 p.m.
Oh, okay. What is it? 9 until when?
9 to 11.
Okay, I think I can probably make 9 to 11.
No, I don't know if there's room, but I guess if you
There might not be room. So
I like that
that's fine. There you go. You were going to invite me, but never mind.
Oh yeah, you can come in. It's and Mark is welcome.
But speaking of, I have a stream in about 90 minutes, so I am going to have to ask to wrap up, or I could just leave, but it's up to you guys.
No, let's wrap up. And
all right.
And yes, this is one of the few streams where I don't get to talk that much, but Derik basically runs the stream. He's like sitting here, he's telling all about his other
Derik was more
stuff.
interesting to be the one who was initiating,
of course,
because he's new to the content and he's not the person who's just been working on it. We want to see his reactions.
No, I'd rather he's better at asking the questions because he can compare and contrast against Avatar, which I don't know as well. I never watched the cartoon. I know everyone told me to, and I know of it. I know the basic stories. I know the concepts. Right. I know how it works. I've never watched it, and I just couldn't get into it. So I am very excited. I am watching the live action, and that I didn't watch the cartoon.
That you didn't watch the cartoon?
I want to, but it starts off horribly. It's so poor. It's so bad.
It gets better. It gets better.
Everyone says that. But I'm one of those like people that they're like, oh well, just you only have to watch the first 40 hours and then it gets really good. I'm like,
I've got several 5-word statements for you. Season 1. The Next Generation. Season 1, Deep Space Nine. Okay,
hey, but I hate to break it to you. That's when I had That's also 1986 when I had nothing but time on my hands. And Deep Space Nine when the internet did barely existed and there was nothing else to do.
It was truly a golden time.
Right, it was a golden time of boredom. So it was like, and not only that, there was nothing else to watch. We talk about that all the time. There would be like Hawk the Slayers on TV, and you would watch it and love it because that's all you had. There was nothing. We were in a desert.
Early editions of Dungeons and Dragons.
No, but I meant in terms of media. Like you were in a desert and someone gave you a rancid drink of water that is absolutely disgusting.
I wouldn't go that far.
Okay, you were given.
I know, I get it. I call it the Monopoly effect,
so
right?
Little out back then.
Everybody grew up. You had like 3 board games in your house to choose from, and so everyone's like, "Oh, I love Monopoly."
Exactly,
and it's like, yeah, but that's just because
and now
there's nothing else to do.
We live in this Darth. I was with my son all day yesterday, and we were talking. It's like kids, they don't date, they don't even do drugs, they don't do alcohol, they don't do any of that stuff because all they're doing is on their phones with each other, talking while scrolling through TikTok because they have so many distractions that they don't need to do other distractions. They don't even need to do these things that we did. And forget about 50, 60 years ago, like, when my parents were kids and that's all they did was drink, it's like, because there was nothing else to do.
They were bored.
They were bored. Now it's the opposite. So, I mean, what's really weird is they don't even date. That's
if you're
weird thing.
If you're super bored and you don't want to
if
turn
you're
to a life
really
of
bored, you got nothing else to do, and I mean nothing else.
If your choice is between drinking yourself to death or doing a drug overdose, you could come watch me on Night's the Last Call at 7 o'clock.
But you know what? You might want to do the first thing. I don't know.
Right, and check out Avenue Studios at 9.
Avenue Studios. Well, in that case, you'll get to just watch. Well, if I play with Mark, I'll end up never talking. So I guess I'll just play and sit there and watch everything.
Well, if you don't want me to come, I don't have to come, Steven.
You can come. I'll just Sequest was on TV. I know the showrunner for Sequest. I went to college with them. What's his? Anyhow, yes, and he also was the showrunner of The Middlemen. That was one of my favorite shows of all time. That was canceled. Javier Grillo Markowitz is his name, by the way. Anyhow, he was supposed to do the Xena reboot, but it fell through. Anyhow.
All right. Well, I know Derik has to get some food real quick before this thing.
Derek's just going to get his food and then talk about who knows what. All right.
7 C's. We know what.
7 C's.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Gotta end the stream.